Okay.
Great. Got it. Let me. Okay, here we go. Good evening, everybody. This is going to be a great experiment. I've given this presentation before, but not in this format. So welcome, everybody, and I appreciate your presence. Um, and let me start off um, with, I have a long list of people that I need to give credit um, because none of this is mine. I'm only a conduit, which means Koen do it, conduit, Koen do it. I figured that out earlier. Um, so the search for the Holy Grain started in 2012. I lived in New Hampshire at the time, and originally I'm from the Netherlands. But in 1989, I moved over here. I had a bakery in Holland, so I'll do a very quick bio here. Um, I had two bakeries in Holland before coming here. Later, we can see some of the pictures of that. And in 1989, I came to New Hampshire, and but it wasn't until 2012 that I had a wake-up call. I mean, I was baking bread. I had a bakery on the Plowshare Farm in Wilton, New Hampshire. And in the meantime, for like 10 years, getting ready for this, I was baking bagels in a bagel shop, just laying low. But so in May of 2012, there was a market in Peterborough, New Hampshire, and there I saw the um, the book by Hugo Erbe. So he became quickly one of my most important mentors. Hugo Erbe is a biodynamic grain researcher and plant transformer. He hates the word breeder. So it's plant transformation. There's a big difference between that and breeding, because breeding is forcing our will on the plant, on nature, on the animal, on the cow. But we need to cultivate a connection. We need to cultivate intimacy with the plant, and or if you're dealing with animals, you need to become like a horse whisperer. And this is what Hugo Erbe did. And this is the only way that we can help a plant make a transformation. Just on a little side note, I'm a fervent student of Enzo Nastati, and we just came out of February, and February is an important moment for plants and the grain to start their journey for the next cycle. And there is a moment where the grain is either going to continue from its memory from the past year, but there in February there's also this window where we can communicate with the seed, with the grain, and see if something new is possible. So we can help this grain to lift it up. So it is really a mutual thing. This is not forcing our will. Now, what do we want? We want bigger yield. We want more resistance. No, when we do this in the interest of the plant, then we receive all the blessings from the spiritual world. And there's a big secret in that we need to go with the spiritual world. And this is what's lacking in what I call natural science. The spiritual part is missing, and it has become very materialistic with all the consequences that we are seeing today. So this is something that I'm also learning from Enzo Nastati, who also was familiar with Hugo Erbe's work and has continued the work of Hugo Erbe. I will get into the details, but I just needed to give credit to these people. And so I'm back in 2012. I saw the book on Hugo Erbe on a market, and suddenly I opened the book, and let me find the quote. Hold on, bear with me, I got it here. I opened the book, and it said that Hugo Erbe was led to a deep engagement with the Gospel of St. John, and particularly with the last words of Christ. And on one of these intensive meditations, the veil of Maya had been removed, and he had experienced a spiritual vision of the Last Supper. Along with the vision had also come a summons to find wild grasses and transform them into new cereals for bread making. A new kind of bread would have to be created for the time when the old varieties had become so corrupted that they had ceased to nourish. You know, when I read that, I just get goosebumps all over again. And so this is what I saw in the book. And then it also talks about the visitor, Helmut Finsterlin, that visited Hugo Erbe in 1949. And he showed Helmut Finsterlin a fully developed strain of dinkel, which he had generated from a wild grass. And then it says, quote, later I saw the new strain of dinkel as a field crop, an astonishing sight to any farmer. The grain stood higher than a man and had up to 20 stalks from one root. The ears were about 30 centimeters long. That's close to like, what is it, a foot long or so. And there were 80 to 120 grains on each stem. So and so that just hit me like a rock, or what's the expression, I don't know, but it suddenly woke me up, and I thought, I've got to start my search for the Holy Grain. And from that moment on, I stopped using wheat, because modern wheat is completely degenerated and corrupted. Even growing it organically is not enough. So the grains need to be lifted up in order to support the new consciousness. Because the old grains no longer do this. And Steiner has pointed this out in the 1920s in a conversation with Ehrenfried Pfeiffer, who was the person that brought the biodynamic farming to the United States. And Pfeiffer was asking Steiner, how come that people are not implementing your teaching? And then the surprising answer came. It's in the nutrition. The current field crops no longer contain the nutrients to support the will forces, and let alone to cultivate the new consciousness. So the will force is one of the conditions cultivating the new consciousness. Others, I will get into it, but just to briefly mention the consciousness of the heart. It includes cultivating clairvoyance, your intuition, overcoming selfishness, and so on. So there's many more details to what the new consciousness really means. So let me finish my my list of people who helped me to start this journey of the search for the Holy Grain. So since I lived in New Hampshire, I thought our local farmer, Trauco Grow, should certainly have heard of Hugo Erbe and could help me find where I could locate this grain. So I talked to Trauger and Alice Grow, and they said that Trauger told me that he knew about Hugo Erbe. By the way, Trauger has in the meantime crossed the threshold. but he did help me connect with Hugh Courtney in, I think it's in Virginia, um, who works on the biodynamic preparations. And Hugh Courtney told me about Carolina Gordon, who is a baker at the time, was a baker in Harlemville, New York. So I contacted Carolina, and she said, you should contact my old neighbor. His name is Bertolt Heiden from the Kaiserlink Institute. And I corresponded. I sent an email to the Kaiserlink Institute, and they responded and said, yes, we know about Hugo Erbe experiments, and there may even be a breeder in the area here that has the grain, and you're welcome to come and visit us. And so I did. Um, and with one of the co-workers at the Kaiserlink Institute, Udo Hennenkamper, we went to visit this breeder, and there was immediately, like, we both looked at the grain, and then we immediately knew that this was the grain that we were looking for. Before, people told me, this man, this breeder, Peter Razzi is his name, Peter Razzi, who needs to be part of my list. He had been, there was not much interest, so he was kind of depressed that there was no interest in this grain. And they said, don't ask too many questions. So I felt like Parsifal, search for the holy grain, don't ask any questions. So, because this was the Fisher King, and the man that, or was it not the Fisher King, Anfortas, the man that suffers. So this Peter Razzi was for me the Grail King. So when I was over there visiting the Kaiserlink Institute, Udo also brought me in touch with Bruno Volledor at the Andreashof, and Bruno is a Brazilian who is an expert in BD compost. And if you're talking about the consciousness, everything starts with the compost. From the compost to the soil, from the soil to the grain, and from the grain to the bread, and from the bread into our bodies, into the consciousness. So it starts with the compost, because everything is depending on nutrition. I'll get to that in a second. So Bruno said he was going to come to the United States and going to Harlemville with the Hawthorne Valley biodynamic farm, that he was going to be there and work with the Nature Institute, also in Ghent and Harlemville, New York. So I said, oh, that's great. I will come and visit you. And he told me about Stefan Snyder, who was at the time the director of Hawthorne Valley. And I contacted Stefan Snyder and saying, okay, I live in New Hampshire, and the farmers here are not grain growers, but Hawthorne Valley had just started growing grain. And so I was asking for their help. And so I did, and eventually moved. And I will continue that in that story with how I got started in Harlemville. And the next person I need to give credit is Mark Moody, who published the book on Hugo Erbe. And through Mark Moody, I got in touch with Enzo Nastati. And also through Mark Moody, I heard from Karen von Gontard from Viva la Vida. And I'm very grateful to Viva la Vida, because this is where Enzo Nastati gave his courses. Before COVID, we had like 7 courses there that Enzo Nastati was teaching in spiritual farming. Enzo is continuing his teaching up to today, and but this is now all been done from Italy, online. And then, so this all happened in 2012, going into 2013. I went to a course at the Pfeiffer Institute in Spring Valley, New York, and there I met Kathy Zeises. She talked to me. She said, I heard about your grain that you're growing, and I know I just had a few rows that are, and you will see it in a minute. Um, but she said, I would love for you to bring it on my farm because I just bought some land and I'm working with Stefan Snyder and Horton Valley to help me get this farm going. And I would love for you to bring your grain um, on my land. And so this was a match made in heaven. It's through this divine intervention that I've been partners with Kathy ever since, and the grain is doing very beautifully on her land. And then the last person I will give credit to, and there's probably some important people that I didn't think of right now, but that is Günther Haug, because Günther also got me in touch with what we call the Schmidt Rogen, or the rye, and I will show some of that later on. But last year, Günther gave me the rye that was cultivated or lifted up by Martin and Georg Wilhelm Schmidt in Germany. And Günther received the seed directly from Georg Wilhelm Schmidt, and when Günther was a garden teacher in Germany. And Günther has grown this rye that I had asked Enzo Nastati about, and Enzo told me, unfortunately, this grain is lost. But to my surprise, Günther still had this, and now we are continue to grow it at on Kathy's farm. So let me now get into the meat of the presentation. Let's see, we go here. Is it this? Let me see if this the first slide. No, this is the first slide. So it says in German, das Brot ernährt uns nicht. Was uns am Brote speist, ist Gottes ewiges Licht oder Gottes ewiges Wort, ist Leben und ist Geist. So there's a lot of wisdom in this from Angelo Salesio, a monk in the 16th, 17th century. First of all, the essence of my presentation is in the first sentence. The bread does not nourish us. And that's, unfortunately, this is the problem, because if we have no nourishment, then we cannot cultivate a new consciousness. So everything that I do is focused on maximizing nutrition, starting with the grain, and then how it's cultivated. Well, I said earlier, the compost, the soil, the grain, so that we have nourishing grain, nourishing bread, and then we can nourish the new consciousness. And what lives in the bread, so this is what's, in English, it's, it's not the bread that feeds us. What feeds us in the bread is God's eternal word, is life and his spirit. So it is saying what lives in the bread is God's eternal word, is life and his spirit. And this lives in the empty spaces of the bread. It's mighty fascinating to study the structure of the inside of the bread, because this is where the invisible lives in the empty spaces of the bread. So let me go to the next slide. Okay, this is a depicts the consciousness of today, and this is a prayer by Adam Biddleston. I would just go through it, and there's a little glitch. Can you? I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but there's a little word missing there. We'll get to that. So when we go out into the world as we have made it, everywhere that speaks to us forgetfulness of the spirit. If human work were to be without love, the earth would become a bleak and barren desert. Through forgetfulness of the Spirit, love ebbs away. Bring to mind in us, O Christ, inspirer of true human love, how we have come to the earth from the fields of light, from the heights of the Spirit. May we bring to the earth what we have seen in the Spirit. May remembrance of God grow strong in our souls, overcoming the mists which hide the meaning in the work of each day. See, we live in a mist. So, and this is the consciousness that rules today. Through forgetfulness of the Spirit, love ebbs away. So to cultivate the new consciousness is to cultivate love, the heart consciousness. Okay. And other than the spiritual aspect, which I call, there are two kinds of the two words for life. There's bios and there's zoe. And the zoe, zoological, also relates to the zodiac, the cosmic. So that's the life forces that come from beyond. And the bios is life on earth. And these are the 7 principles of a life-giving bread. So this pertains to the bios. And let me see. Yeah, they're all 7 on here. So it's the quality of the grain. I'll get into all these details. The milling process needs to be whole grain, not white flour. Although if bread is prepared with spiritual intentions, then we can lift up the bread and it will be spiritual cosmic nutrition. It's a different kind of nutrition that will be especially in a white spelt bread. So there's a lot more nourishment in a white spelt bread made with the ordained malt leaven than an ordinary white bread. There's 2 worlds of difference. Then the quality of the water, I will get into that. Oh, excuse me. The salt, I might say something about it here because I don't have any slides on the salt, but in front of the coast of France, there is a particular very interesting area, Brittany, that has rich Celtic history. You can find Merlin's grave there. And on the coast, in this Celtic area, there's an old tradition of harvesting salt from the ocean. And this is a conservancy area where 2 Gulf streams meet, a warm and a cold Gulf stream. They meet there and they create also big differences between the tide. So there is a lot of energy there. That's the point I wanted to point out, is there is much life there, more compared to like other regions where salt is harvested. Plus, it is all done by hand. So the salt doesn't have to be, it's not contaminated. It's just in its natural state, unrefined. You can ask me questions about it later. The next factor is the proper fermentation. We'll get into the details of that. And then finally, when the bread goes through the resurrection in the oven, and this is called palingenesis, making life out of death. So the whole breaking process is actually a reflection of the passion of Christ, because there is a definite connection between bread and Christ. It said earlier, Hugo Erbe studied the last words of Christ. Well, here we go. I am the bread of life. And of course, the Last Supper, we bake the bread. And then last but not least, contemplate about the place where Jesus was born, Bethlehem, the house of bread. So, and that will, I guess, tell it all. There's this an unbreakable connection between bread and Christ. So if we lose bread, then and we corrupt the bread, then we lose our connection also, not only with Christ, but we are losing the connection with the spiritual world, thanks to our materialism. But there are remedies. The consciousness can be lifted up. This is the picture of the meeting of Abraham and Melchizedek, but there's a history before this. So Abraham and Melchizedek, that's 4,000 years ago. But we really have to go back to the, in regards to lifting of the consciousness. So first we have the use of fire. And there's kind of a dividing line when there isn't really bread, but there is in those days, I'm talking more than 10,000 years ago. For me, the history really starts about 10,000 years ago. Before that was the invention of fire, and now we're talking still about the Neanderthals, and so they didn't quite make it, and they did not make it into the new consciousness. And yes, they had fire, but they did not really have bread, because the cultivation of grains happened through the mediation of Zarathustra. So this is where the story really begins, with Zarathustra, the cultivation of the grains, and that's about 10,000 years ago. So people start to grow grains and they make flatbread, but then another divine intervention happens, and the birth of leavened bread. And this is 6,000 years ago. There's 6,000 years of bread. Coincidentally, also the beginning of the dark period, so also called the Kali Yuga, 6,000 years of darkness, which I'm getting to that in a moment, but we are just coming out of that, of 6,000 years of darkness. But we had bread, so and this bread, leavened bread, that was invented. Well, I think I need to correct myself. It's I think the Sumerians were the ones that came up with the first ones that came up with leavened bread. But obviously, this was a divine intervention, as you can understand, because the Greeks knew this, and that's why they called bread pan, because Pan was the god that brought the bread to down to earth. Just as earlier, Prometheus brought the fire. I can't get into that. That's another study. But what does it mean? Something like he who foresaw. That's Prometheus. That's the fire. But now we're at in the time of Zarathustra and the birth of leavened bread. So the Sumerians were able to then start. This is the cradle of civilization. So the popular story that it was the Egyptians who invented bread, but the Sumerians, who are east of Egypt, are really the ones who invented leavened bread, and thus were able to lift up the culture and start civilization. The surrounding tribes, nomads, were still depending on flatbread, and that included Abraham. So they were still shepherds and sustaining themselves with unleavened bread until. So I'm not saying that when Abraham met Melchizedek, I'm not sure of this, but this is where Abraham was initiated in the bread and the wine, and it may very well have been leavened bread. So here is another advance, an important advance of the consciousness. This is the birth of the individual consciousness, when human beings start to wake up, and we start to lose more and more our clairvoyance, but we start to cultivate the individual consciousness. So this thinking for yourself, not the group consciousness, is another essential part of the new consciousness. Let's see where we. So this is 4,000 years ago. Yeah, I don't want to get into this yet, but I'll leave this slide. So then let me go back here. So this is 4,000. There seems to be an advance in the consciousness every 2,000 years. So after Abraham, 2,000 years later, we get the teachings of Christ, which is a major impulse in the advancement of humanity, and because we were stuck at that time, and teaching the new consciousness of the heart of love your neighbor as yourself. So to overcome the selfishness and to cultivate selflessness. So then another 2,000 years, we come to, that's not the time that we live in, and also the time of Rudolf Steiner, because then we start the New Age in 1899. And so the teacher of the time is Rudolf Steiner, and bringing another major advance in the consciousness. So this is the mission of Rudolf Steiner, and everybody that came before him, like the mission of Christian Rosenkreuz. It's all to cultivate a higher level of consciousness. And whenever there is an advance in the consciousness, there is a role for the bread. So Rudolf Steiner said, with the new age, you also are going to need a new kind of bread. Like I said earlier, when Hugo Erbe, who was a student of Rudolf Steiner, not sure whether he actually met Steiner, but he started from the wild grains and then cultivating a bread for a new consciousness, for a new time. So Steiner said the old bread, which is it doesn't have to be, it's not that it doesn't nourish us in the past, but it's the sourdough bread is a bread that comes out of the Middle Ages, and that or actually relates to the consciousness of the Middle Ages, because it has a genealogy. See, here's the connection with Melchizedek, because we need a bread with no genealogy, a bread that's new every time, that supports the new consciousness. And this is the Ordeum malt leavened bread that was inspired by Steiner's ideas and Hugo Erbe's directions to make a bread new every time. So you instead of going to the store and buying yeast, this dry powder, a culture can be grown. Hugo Erbe grew it from honey and salt. If you have a question, we can go into that later. I'm not getting into the details of that. Excuse me. But I decided that, the truth is like the center of town. There are many roads that lead to it. So honey salt is not the only way that you can make a bread that supports the individual consciousness. And I thought, yeast, how do we make a more better quality of yeast that has both biological and cosmic quality? Why not see what yeast likes to grow on? And it likes to, the ideal food for yeast appears to be malted barley. And so to make a leaven for bread out of grain, the most balanced grain, Ordeum, meaning order of God, and I pause. So that was another wake-up call to me to look into barley as the nourishment for the yeast to make a new dry culture. So we will get into that next week, how that is made and how do you make the bread. But just take my word for it now that you make a dry culture from malted barley that contains wild yeast and bacteria that make the bread digestible. So every time you take a tablespoon of this leaven, like you would with a tablespoon of yeast, and you don't save any mother dough. So this is no genealogy. Also, the Apostle Paul, in one of his letters, for people that know the Bible can find it, but I don't know exactly where he says it, but he calls Christ a high priest in the order of Melchizedek with no genealogy. So that's the key point, and that's the connection also with the new bread with no genealogy. Okay, that's moving into another part of the presentation. Um, Here is the genealogy of wheat. And I need to grab a note here. Okay, here we go. So the ancestors of wheat really starts with. I hope you can see my cursor there. Can you see my arrow?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so you see there's the wild einkorn. The wild einkorn, now we're talking about the Neanderthal time, you know. It crossed with a goat grass. I mean, this whole thing is in German because I got it from the Kaiserling Institute, but you know, we don't have to understand everything. I will just point out the important parts. So this is the genealogy of wheat. Wild einkorn crossed with a goat grass. A speltoids means meat spelts. That means there was a husk around it. So also the einkorn had a husk around it, which modern wheat has lost. In my opinion, that is a domestication, and I think it's we need this cover gives us gives the grain protection. I'll give a little anecdote with this. There are certain grains, including barley and spelt, that have this husk around it, and this husk contains silica. Now, this is kind of so everything that's on the outside is also called sometimes a helm or helmet. This is where the word helmet comes from. So everything that's on the outside is gives us protection, like a mantle, or sometimes called helm or helmet. Now, and it does contain silica, and silica is supposed to is important to nourish the new consciousness. It nourishes our nervous system, our thinking. So silica is important to advance the new consciousness. So there's a saying in Holland, the people that are born with the helmet, those are babies that are born with a membrane. They're born in a cover, like the spelt has a cover, and this is a phenomenon in nature, like tomatillos, and so there's more silica in that. And there's a saying that people are born with the helm. Those people are more apt to become clairvoyant. So I guess with the silica, we're on the right track, and I'm very pleased to have Hugo Erbe spelt that has this phenomenon. Okay, let's quickly continue. Where's my here? So we go so they crossed and produced the wild emmer, and out of the wild emmer, that's 16,000, 17,000 years ago, came the cultivated emmer. See, I said cultivation started about 10,000 years ago, cultivating emmer. Out and also wheat. So this is the triticum is the family name of wheat. So this is hard wheat where noodles are made from, and the soft wheat this is what modern wheat came out of, and spelt. Well, spelt may actually be what most people think as an ancient grain, but spelt may actually be one of the most modern grains, because spelt came after when wheat crossed back with the emmer, to pick up the husk that it had lost, and out of that came spelt, in German called dinkel. And this originated in Europe. So while all the other grains came out of the Fertile Crescent area, in Central Europe appeared spelt. And this is why the English call it spelt, and Germans call dinkel spelt, because it has this husk around it. And I have to mention, I'm not an agronomist, I'm not a scientist, but I'm a student of the spiritual science. So this is where my information comes out of the spiritual science, and for whatever I knew about biology. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, if you can ask me about what I think of mutations, but I had an argument with the biology teacher on that. What is a mutation? And how can it be spontaneous? I mean, everything has cause and an effect. It's very unscientific to call a mutation a spontaneous change in the genetic makeup. No, we can influence the genetic makeup, and maybe there's details to that and what Hugo Erbe did, and so I'm going to skip this because I already covered them. Quickly going through the genealogy. So this is a quack grass, wild grass, from which our modern grains evolved. And then here I'm illustrating what I just was talking about. This is the goat grass that crossed with the einkorn. This is the cultivated einkorn that became then the emmer. And so the einkorn is a diploid. It means it has 7 chromosomes. Emmer has doubled that. Now we have 14. Whenever there's a genetic, when there's a natural cross, the genes double, and so this is 14. And in modern wheat and spelt, we have 42 chromosomes. This is the goat grass, Aegalops squarosa, that crossed back again with the emmer to produce spelt. And here you can see the sequence. You go from einkorn to emmer to spelt. And you can also place wheat here. And einkorn, emmer, spelt. And here's an image of the spelt. And this is Kamut. I can't get into that today, but that's another variant of wheat. Here are the grains that I started with. On the left here, this is the spelt that came from Hugo Erbe. Here are some of the wheat varieties that I received from the Kaiserling Institute. Notably here, wheat with some awns on it. The awns are like antenna, which I personally would like to bring back in the spelt. It doesn't currently have it, but that would be one of the things I would like to bring the antenna of silica, because this is silica. So I started with these grains. Then in December, no, this is in December, but the grain was planted in the fall, and with the help of Emily, who is a garden teacher at the Hawthorne Valley School. And so this is the children's garden where they found room to accommodate me. And so I'm going to follow what happened there. So this is in the spring. It got thinned out, and this is in May where the grain's grown up. Now we just kind of jump forward. So this is maybe in 2018 where I have increased the quantity of spelt, and so you can see here's a small field. That was probably in the fall, or maybe in April. Here we go in May, and so it grows up, and then in the ears mature. You have the blooming, which I don't have an exact picture of, but yeah, this is a picture of the wheat with the awns, AWN as awns. So those are the antenna. And so this is the grain almost ready to harvest. This is called the milk stage. So before this is the flowering stage, and now the seed is set, and this is the milk stage. So it needs to mature and ripen. This is the rye that I got from Günther Haug, called the Schmid Rogan. It's almost as tall as a man, and I'm a small man, but but it's at least as tall as me. And we have to work with this because Günther was telling me that the grain had originally been much taller, and the ears were also longer. So we'll have to work with that. So I think next we might have a, oh yeah, so this is the video. If you listen carefully beyond the wind, you can hear the rustle of the grains. It takes maybe a minute or so to play this, so I'm gonna take a little breather. It's not gonna be too long, but we'll just show the whole thing. Especially towards the end, which is not this yet, you can hear more of the rustling. Almost done. Okay, let's see. Okay, good, it worked. So here's the grain fully ripe, ready to harvest. This may, yeah, I'm okay. The post you see here, that's a dividing line, or maybe it goes this way. This is my spelt, and then there's the spelt grown by Hawthorne Valley. See, they're helping me harvesting and mowing it, and so, but it's a lot of, mostly done by hand. Here we go. There's the harvest, carrying the grain to the, and this is to store it into the yurt. So this is quite, at the 2018 had quite an amount of grain. Unfortunately, the next year we had a disaster, and I had to start over, but I'm still at it, but I lost a great deal of the harvest. See what's, oh, so this is still the traditional way of harvesting, not with the combine, because and here again is a corruption. If the combine is used, the grain does not ripen on the field. It's immediately mowed and threshed. And when the grain ripens off the field, then it becomes more digestible. So everything is focused on making it more digestible. Now, not only the seed, but the whole process, from the compost to the soil and so on, to unlock the nutrients. And the miracle really happens in the bread, where one of my mentors that I haven't mentioned, I said, forgetting people, but Jacques de Langre was an important mentor for me to get into the bread baking. And he wrote a little pamphlet called Bread's Biological Transmutation. So there really is a change happening to unlock all the nutrients. And here's the combine. It's mowing right now. This is just the mowing and not the threshing. So I think he's mowing the rye here. And in the foreground here is the spelt. Oh, that's good. And then we have another, see what it does. Okay. So now we're following along the process of the 7 principles. So I was at the quality of the grain. Now this is the malted barley. So and now we're going into the milling process. And this is the sprouted barley that I use for my 11th, but it needs to be crushed. And this is the time before I had even a mill. So I used my rolling pin to crush it. And so this is the crushed barley. Well, here is a picture of the inside of a mill. This is a Dutch artist, and notice the patterns on the millstone. So here again, to unlock the nutrients in the grain to make it more digestible. Sound like a broken record, but this is what it's all about. Because in industrial milling, you don't have this. It's just pulverized and as quickly as possible, as fine as possible. And here, imagine the individual grain travels the whole path of the stone. So, and here again is another, this is an existing mill in the south of Holland. Interestingly, so the mill was in existence in the 6th or 7th century already. This is a water mill. And again, watch the stones, see the stones here. You see the gears. This is the axle. Again, I have a picture of this. So this mill around the year 1000 was owned by the Crusader Godfrey of Bouillon. He owned this mill in the year 1000, this Crusader. He's a very fascinating character. So this is how it works. And the axle, you will see a movie just after this. This goes to the wheel that's outside, that's scooping the water. And then it's leveraged on these gears. And above here is the millstone, but we will see that in a second. Okay, yeah, this is the millstones here. This is called the hopper. So the grain goes in here and falls onto the stone. See, the gears are turning. So this goes into, see it here, goes into the middle of the stone. It turns to stone. And here, oh yeah, this is the video. See, I was there and we go outside. So this is how it works. The water is lifted up. That's the axle. A little fuzzy here, but see, these are the gears that are turning. If I get the camera right here. So it's leveraged onto the next. And then here, these are just under the stones. The floor above here, this is where the grinding takes place. I don't know what I'm doing, how I'm doing about time, but what time is it? Okay.
It's 7 o'clock. I mean, 1 hour.
8 o'clock.
We did 1 hour. 8 for
It's
you.
1 hour. Yeah. So I plan to continue, but if it's in half an hour, maybe you can give me an alert, and then we'll see where we're at.
I'll do.
Okay, this was this is the breads and the pastries made from the spelt in the mill there that we just saw. Everything is made from local spelt. So this is not even an actual food store. This is just an ordinary tourist attraction, you know. That we notice how the mill works. Now, this is the mill called the Crown. This is a mill in Arnhem. where I had my Arnhem is in Holland, also where Steiner gave lectures at the Theosophical Society in Arnhem. And this is where this mill was the mill that I got my grain from, that I used in my bakery in Arnhem in the Netherlands. See, this is the mill, and there's a video here. Let's see, this should play. There we go. So the beautiful thing about a windmill, and it's extremely windy, so you can see the sails have removed. There's no sails on here, but there still is this rhythm. When you stand in the mill, you hear whoop, whoop, whoop. So you hear that so this rhythm is transferred into the grain. Steiner also talks about this, bringing this rhythm, to bring the rhythm into the grain. That's to connect. Whenever you want to connect with the spiritual world, you need to step into their rhythm, into their resonance. This is what Hugo Erbe did, and just to lift a little tip of the veil, he was an opera singer and used the vibration of his voice to get into the rhythm and to cultivate the intimacy with the grain. So you can ask me questions about that later. So this is the mill that I started with when I had after. So I didn't have to crush the grain with the rolling pin anymore. This is the inside. So this is a man-made stone. It's a natural stone, but it's a composite stone. That's not ideal, but it's better. It's way better than industrial milling. So yeah, it's a small stone, and it makes a certain RPM, round per minute. And so if you have a big mill like this one, it's slowed down, and so the grains can really comfortably be opened up, and that's important to unlock the nutrients. Okay, now so we go from the seed to the milling process to the water. So this is a spring in a conservation area here locally, with the presence of many elemental beings, which I of course couldn't take the pictures, but there's bells, and there's a little miniature parasol and a table so they can have a drink. It's like to invite the presence of the elemental beings. So this is, they're not all the springs are the same. So there's a tremendous power coming out of here, and that's what I'm looking for, living water. So I'm talking about, bringing life into the bread through the milling, and the salt I mentioned, how that's enlivened, and here's the water. This is a flow form, another way to enliven the water. The water goes into spirals here. This is in Campbell Copake in Ghent, New York. That's where this is. This is again in Arnhem, where there's a respectable presence of anthroposophists, and they made sure that they got this flow form in the public park. The water that flows in here comes from the largest national park in Europe that's not crossed by a highway. And this is a national park in Holland, just north of the city of Arnhem. And so this is very pure water that ultimately goes into the Rhine. And the Rhine is passing by Arnhem. And that's a story for another time. But this is, okay, this is also a video. Yeah, you can see how the water flows and how it spirals. It's up here, up there. We go up there. So this is to enliven the water, to have more chi and more life force. Of course, the etheric, to enliven the etheric in the water. Okay. It's best if I let these videos just run, because otherwise I get glitches. So far I've been having some good luck. Let's see, but now I'm missing my arrows. But let's see, no, just as I say, the glitches stop video. No. I'll get back on track here. Here we go. Okay, so now the next step to make the bread digestible and to bring life in it, one of the 7 principles is proper fermentation. Okay, you can have sourdough, which is very beneficial in the digestibility, but I've taken it up a couple of notches. So this is an innovation of the sourdough. As I said, through indications of Rudolf Steiner. And this is mighty fascinating when you study these bubbles. If you know what you're looking at, then you can see the color differences. Like the yellowish color comes from the barley. It's like, here's a little yellowish. The pinkish color, and especially here, represents the spelt, because I start the leaven with the malt leaven with the barley, and then I feed it with spelt. So it has both. Okay. Here you can see that this is how much it rises, and it tells you that it's ready to be used. We will get into that next week. Okay, and this is the final step, the wood-fired oven, how the bread is baked and what happens there. I alluded to that, how the actually when the fire actually burns up the oxygen, then you clean it out, and the oven is hermetically closed with dough. I didn't have a picture of that, but traditionally the door goes on and is closed, and then this is smeared with dough so that it is hermetically closed, and the oxygen will burn up, and you have what's called reduction. Reduction is the opposite of oxidation, because oxidation means aging, fatigue, acidification. When you have muscle ache, that's oxidation. So, and that causes aging and illness. So to make a bread that's made in an environment that is not oxidized, but reduction, gives a much healthier bread. So this is why, one of the reasons why you want to use ideally a wood-fired oven. So let's see. Okay, this is actually, I've come to the end of the 7 principles. But again, here, this is my first sacred act in the divine, how do you call it? The divine occupation of bread baking. I'm in my 20s here, working in a bakery in Amsterdam, where I learned, I already had learned how to bake bread, but under the guidance of the master baker Patrick Lepore, another one I need to give credit. And for people that are from our local New York, Massachusetts area, Patrick Lepore was both the mentor of me and Richard Bourdon of the Berkshire Mountain Bakery. And this is the bakery where we started in. And then when I pulled this bread out of the oven, and I thought, oh my God, this is not me. How did this happen? These beautiful breads. So I was humbled right away that this is just, and ever since, that this is a work, a collaboration between the spirit world and human beings. So that's the work with love, because if the earth would become a bleak and barren desert. So we fast forward a little in history, and this is the bakery that I had just before coming to the US. It was called John Barleycorn's Bread Cafe. You see, it's a little cafe. And here are my initial attempts to make the malt leavened bread, but it has much evolved over time. And these are some of my friends, and I'm just baking away. And this is the famous apple strudel. Everything, well, this is still all wheat. I hadn't made the choice yet to no longer work with wheat. Okay, we had a customer here. A 6-year-old boy made this cartoon for me. This boy was so grateful for my bread because he couldn't eat anything else. He has allergies, and and it is a challenge to come up with good bread. So here he says, "Today I have good bread," said Koen. So he spelled my name initially with a C, and so here, I'm his hero. Okay, and then and this is currently where I'm baking in Philmont, New York. So this is spelt bread. I have conversations with people, and the people at Hawthorne Valley, they're fans of my bread, and I tell them, who bakes spelt bread like this? Well, I can't take any personal credit for this, but there's no bread like this, and it's not my credit, but this is just how it comes out. All the people that in the names that I mentioned, and there are people in the spiritual world that I owe it to, and I stand on the shoulders of my forefathers. So, and this is the newest bread, the einkorn bread. So I tried my best to, here you see the beautiful structure, to lift it up, because einkorn is actually the most primitive grain, but lots of nutrition, lots of flavor, and yeah, people love it. So I was introduced to einkorn by Ellie Rogosa. Um, she is also a grain scientist, anthropologist. I know she's amazing, and we formed a team with some local people, Ian from Turtle Tree Seeds, and Kathy, who is the owner of the farm. And so our mission is to lift up the grains and to make bread digestible again. Here we see a picture of the light root. So now I'm moving into the Zoe part, the cosmic nutrition, because this is what's different between the sourdough bread and what I am doing. Sure, sourdough, you can get proper fermentation, but this is the light root that is a relative of the cassava. And when Gunther Wachsmuth was one of the associates of Steiner, he brought this back from Asia, showed it to Steiner, and he said, this is the root that helps us overcome the materialism, because believe it or not, this is the top, the soil, this is just under the soil, and see, the deeper it goes, the bigger it gets. So is the light that penetrates the darkness. And so this symbolizes the Christ impulse. So this can be made into a flour and added to bread. When I make my starter, there's going to be like a homeopathic quantity of the light root going to be added to the bread, together with the dewdrops. And we can get into that next week, but there are three forces: the silica from the barley that goes into the leaven, the light root powder that represents the Christ impulse, and the dewdrop that represents the beings of form. Dew, is related to the French Dieu, dew, and in German and in Dutch it's called Tao, the Tao of, the Tao of life. And this is what we call dewdrops. Amazing. So yeah, I know I'm on the right track. This is how the light root grows. It's a vine climber, and okay. And here this is a crystallization picture of the, so through, well, let me back up. Modern science says there's no difference between organic or conventional. But they just lack the tools and understanding to show any of those life forces that are present. You know, the more I look at this picture, the more I see the order. This is a Dioscorea batata, is the name, the Latin name for light root. So the more I look at this, the more I discover the orderly pattern, and I don't know what the coloring will say. So it's almost related to grain. I have a picture that's not part of the presentation, but I'll just relate to it here. I had a so I bring this grain with me, and I have it at home sitting on my desk. And in a cold winter night, then there's frost on the window, and lo and behold, the expression of the grain, I have a picture of it, just not in this presentation. So the picture of the grain is on the window. So you see, it's amazing. And Hugo Erbe was also pointing to that when something is expressed on the window, you have to pay attention to it. But this is a crystallization, pretty much the same thing. It's an expression of the invisible. So, and modern science hasn't figured this out yet. This is a different way called, what is it called? The chromatography. This is what Bruno Follador does to express the etheric forces. So I don't educated enough to give you an explanation here. And so we come to the end of our presentation. This is Hugo Erbe with an applaud for all my mentors. And I think I come to the end of this. Maybe I did it within the alluded time. So time for questions. So I guess this is it, because yeah, there are some, this is additional pictures that this is natural food store and some sourdough bread. And this is some heirloom rye bread. This is Amor bread and champagne rye bread. Just, and that's it. Thank you very much.
That was a beautiful presentation, Koen.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Now, if you want to ask a question, because there were some in the chat, and I'm glad Edward was answering, I'm glad. Raise your hand like this. You don't have to put a virtual hand and ask the question. Unmute yourself. Thank you. I would like to ask you something, maybe was not in the presentation, but I read something in January that which you do is the importance of the consciousness, I don't know how to say it, of the person when is doing the food or preparing the food. That is more important than what we eat. And all the steps that you do, and also you did not explain, maybe you're going to explain that next time. When you do in Easter time, every day you do a step that you almost follow what happened there. If you can explain that, maybe it's not, or it's too long, I don't know. But those two things are very important, I think, Koen, for people to know.
Okay, yes. I do everything consciously, and it sounds like a cliche, but you have to experience this. When I make the bread, everything is made in the rhythm. Everything is made with consciousness. And yes, we will get into that next week. During the Holy Week before Easter, this is the ideal time to make the leaven, because like I said, it mimics the passion of Christ. So what better time there is than to make the leaven around that time. I also make, I can't get into that, but I make a preparation called the bread and wine preparation in that same time when you ferment the bread with grape juice and then you dry it, and then you have a bread and wine preparation made at that same time. I will get back to that next week and to the details of the bread making. But, does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. I know
I can
that you
get more
explained,
into details if you like.
well, I remember that you explained that every day was something that you have to do. You have to watch it and all the steps towards Easter, you did it. You mimic that with a,
Right,
that is, was incredible to me.
right. Well, I try to mimic it. For instance, Friday, you need to stop because this is the death process. So I just mimic it and stop the fermentation. So that's a death. And it goes into the refrigerator to be taken out on Sunday morning. And then the leaven, yeah, people will not understand this right now, but I will get into the bread making process next week. So, and maybe we have to do another session, I don't know, on the practical steps. So, any other questions?
I would just like to say thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And can you give us an address? I would like to order some bread. I would love to try some of this bread watching this presentation. I was
Okay, here we go. Send an email to search for the holy grain. Search for the holy grain at Gmail. So this is not, as you know, the holy grain with an N, the N of Nancy. You got it? Search for the holy grain at Gmail.
I did search for the Holy Grail, and I thought, oh, no, I never get anywhere. But
No?
I did it wrong. So until I read it again.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I just want to say that I have experienced your bread by coming to Enzo Nistati several years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And my partner, Paul Lynch, and I order your bread several times a year, and you send it out. And it's amazing, and it's amazing for life. And your dedication, your seriousness, your love of Steiner, it's all very inspiring, and you're one of a kind, Koen.
Oh, we all are. Let me say this. There are 2 days that are important in your life. The day you were born and the day you found out why. So I know why, I know my job. So find out why, what's your job. So,
Sounds good. In addition, would you mind putting up that slide that has the 7?
okay, let me see if I can find it.
Just because I got 1 through 3 or 4, and I want to write the rest of them.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this.
I think here it is. You see it?
Ken, you're next. You want to
The
talk?
next one.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank
Excuse
you.
me. Is this the person that asked? Is this do you see it?
Oh, yeah, that is it. That
You
is it.
got it.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. Who's next?
Yes, Koen, thank you again very much.
And your name?
My name is Ken Freeman.
Hi, Ken.
Hi. I'm really excited about the work that you're doing, and to know that you've been working with the ideas of Hugo Erbs, who I've been a fan of for probably 15 years or so now.
Great.
Really excited by that. I'm curious if you have in your studies come across other things that have been published besides this book.
Not really.
Because there's so much in this book. There's so many,
You mean
roads of discovery that you can go down. I just wondered if you'd found anything else besides.
yeah, you're talking about the little book, the Hugo Erbs biodynamic new biodynamic preparations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Yeah, I love the little books because those are the most powerful. No, there's not much published. Maybe no. Helmut Finsterlin was the expert that made this all public, and he says, that Hugo Erbe was also ostracized by the society, and so this is part of the reason. All the good people are ostracized. You know that, right? All the-
We know.
Well, again, thank
Yeah,
you for your
no,
work.
no, Helmut Finsterlin is about the only source for Hugo Erbe. And other than that, Enzo Enzo Nastati knows. Yeah, I don't know if he met Helmut Finsterlin, so there's a connection. See, he might not have met Hugo Erbe, but no, because he died in '65. But Enzo Nastati met Helmut Finsterlin, and they had a 3-day talk. When yeah, that's another story. But yeah, so Enzo also knows more about it. So I would just say, you follow the teaching of Enzo Nastati, then you get to know Hugo Erbe. If that answers your question.
Hi, this is
Yes,
Delmar
thank you.
here. I thought I might add, put a mention in for the website Considera. That's Mark
Uh-huh.
Moody's. You mentioned Mark in your acknowledgements of people.
Right.
And Considera has huge amounts of information overall, but particularly with Enzo Nastati's work and Hugo Erbe's. So it's a good way to
Yeah.
download things that are not generally available elsewhere.
Yeah, thanks, Delmar. Yeah,
Good to
that's
see you, by the way.
absolutely true. Considerable information.
What was the name of that website?
Considera, like consider, but then with an A on the end of it.
Thank you.
Considera, I think it's a British, I think he's British, right?
Yeah, he's British. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you a little anecdote on that, because so I've been on the outside of anthroposophy until 2012, and here I'm thrown right in the middle of it, and so I have to go to the biodynamic conference, and this was in Wisconsin a number of years ago. Sit down for lunch, and a tall fellow walks up to the table, and I see his name tag, and it said Mark Moody. I said Mark Moody, and I've been corresponding with him, not knowing who he was, but we had a little conversation there, and there he was. Because this is how I got in touch with Hugo Erbe's methods. Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, no, that's not what I want to do. Seems like
Maybe, Koen, you can tell us what would it look like next week, or what you're going to attempt to do next week?
okay. Yeah, I will be still. Hope it's not going to be a logistical nightmare. I have to like pre-record. Now, obviously, I know how to bake bread, but yeah, how to, because I have to show on when it's Monday night, 7 o'clock. Then of course we can't go through the whole process, but I will show clips of the whole process, and I will go through it step by step. Step 1 is the warming up the water that I'm going to use for the starter. So you see, there's a difference between the leaven and the starter. So this is my terminology. The leaven is the dry powder, the culture. And I will explain how that is made. But I have a supply of that. So that, like I said, I make it once or twice a year. And so I take a tablespoon of that. Well, hold on. The first thing that I do is warm up the water. And then I will put some dewdrops in it. Everything that I do is is more than meets the eye. you know, I have to I have to pound it like a homeopathic remedy, you know. Um, no, hold on. Yeah, no, it's, I don't know if you haven't, nobody can see what I'm doing, but I have a little bottle of dewdrops um, that I need to pound like a homeopathic remedy. So I can just only describe it now, and I will go briefly through that. So that energizes the dewdrops, and then that goes into the water, which is uh, lukewarm. Then I stir it in a lemniscate, ex Deo nascimur, in Christo morimur, per spiritum sanctum revivissimus. So I just raced through that, but you know, then at that moment, it gets the culture goes in there, and then I stir it with a vortex 2 ways, and the lightwood powder is in there, and then so the water containing the dewdrops, the lightwood powder, and the leaven, those three, are then poured onto flour. Okay, you mix the flour in the water, and then that needs to ferment, needs to sit. Remember this picture here? It's coming up on the fermentation. Or is it after the milling? Water. I had a slide of it with the bucket, and yeah, I don't know where it went. I showed the bucket of the starter and the how much it rose. I can't find that. Where's that picture? That's, you know, there's all kinds of divine intervention happening, and it's funny. Okay, I had it in here, but so then you make the starter. It needs to develop, and then in the morning it's ready, and then you make the bread. So there are all these. It's a 36-hour process. Okay, so I need to make some video clips and show what I just did, and then fast forward 12 hours, fast forward. So I still need to figure out how I'm going to put this together. But do you need to have more description, or is that's what I'm going to do? We're going to bake bread. You can follow me around, or just see how I'm doing it. Okay.
Once you mention that you wish there were more bakers, people that make bread around the world with this type of consciousness.
Right.
And if there are not bakers, then we have to learn how to do this.
Well,
but,
we're all bakers.
Yeah, but if the thing to me is the secret is that leaven that you have. I don't know, how can we do it if because you have the powder and so forth. And so it's not, yeah, we can learn about the process, but so important to have that leaven. So what can we do about that? You have to think.
Okay, let me first say that the time of secrets is over. But so I will explain exactly how it is made. You can make your own version. Maybe at some point I might have sent you the story of how Hugo Erbe makes his leaven, and it's yeah, you need to have some understanding of spiritual science to do it successfully. But for people who were just starting, and I had to start somewhere, you know, you discover along the way. I will provide the leaven for anybody that wants to make this bread. So, and I'm making a new batch. I'm going to make an extra large batch just before Easter.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying. And then I will be able to provide anybody that wants to make this bread with the powder. Out of the powder, you make your overnight starter to make the bread. And if you're a baker, if you've made bread before, then you will understand how this works. Okay. But I do want, I would like to see it commercially picked up, you know. But bakers, they don't have to make the leaven; they just buy it. You know, I would like to have it manufactured at some point, so that it's just beyond me. And then, you know, it's time for me to retire. So, yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Seems like.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you all leave, I would like for you to tell me, because I am new with this system. Did you receive this twice or 3 times or 4 times? Because there were many people that were entering later, and I have to add it in a separate list. And it was a pain. I'm so sorry if you received the thing many times, but please give me feedback, because I need to learn how to do this workable. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, no, you did a fantastic job, and I'll add you to my credit list.
No.
But I was going to say, you know, I do this with all my heart and all my mind and all my soul. So this is not about money. However, if you want to support the work that I do, I don't know, there's in the GoFundMe, you know, I was gathering money together to acquire the mill. So I did acquire the mill, but if anybody wants to still donate money, they can go to, what is it?
Yeah.
Baker.
GoFundMe. I already sent it to everyone, I think. So
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
everybody should have it, but
I appreciate your donation, whoever did donate to it. And but see, I used to wonder myself many years ago, to say, you know, if you and they say, you know, get a job, get a real job. But I wanted, well, it's important what kind of work you do. Would you still do it if you didn't get paid for it? Okay.
right.
And definitely, if I would not get paid for it, I would still definitely do this. This is extremely important work. You know, we need the nourishment. And this is way beyond me. I'm just a link in the chain. Yeah. Rudolf Steiner, Hugo Erbe, those are the giants. You know, I'm happy to be a link in the chain. So if there's no more questions, then I thank you very much for participating. Last chance. Any other questions? Otherwise, next week.
I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Koen.
So next
Laura,
week,
maybe you want to stay on for a minute.
yes. So I would send again
Thank you.
next week.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Koen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next time.
See you next time.
Very fortunate to have you around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen, we have to stay with Koen. So bye-bye. And Jacqueline, I don't know who, Jacqueline.
I'm trying to do it right now.
Yeah. So I cannot do it for you. Yeah, you have to get out completely. There we go.
You
And then
did it.
we have one more person here, Jacqueline Monteserin. There.
Gone. Your sister's gone too.
Yes, she's gone to me too. Well,
This is a nice video conference.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I sent it so many times. People at the last minute through in your presentation, they were asking me. So I hope they did not see, because I have to go look for their email, put them, I mean, do so many things behind the scene. And hopefully people did not see that and they saw you. So this is one thing, which I don't know. Oh,
Yeah, well,
wait, recording. Ooh, we are talking here, recording. Stop.